Prohibition, a killer of lives and liberty. The United States has the highest rates of persons that are incarcerated, and yet we call ourselves the land of the free. Many Americans simply wish that their government to leave them alone, instead of interfering on their day-to-day lives. Prohibitions have been used to criminalize victimless behavior. Victimless behavior that throws the most vulnerable and morally innocent of these persons in a prison cell. A prison cell amongst rapists, thieves, and violent offenders. This should not be tolerated. One example of prohibitions is the drug war. The drug war has incarcerated over 500,000 Americans each year, which adds to excessive prison costs, and the taxpayer fits the bill every time the government claims another victim. Rather than sending these persons to prison and permanently denying their constitutional rights while in prison and while out of prison, we should instead implement programs that will assist these people in physical and mental help for which they deserve. Therefore, we must stop the drug war. You may ask, but Mr. Horton, doesn't prohibitions prevent other people from hurting other people? Unfortunately, no, it doesn't. In fact, prohibitions end up hurting the same people that we as a society desire to protect. However, we end up hurting these people with our good intentions. Besides the drug war, we now look at the 1920s, America's first major prohibition. America's major prohibition that first took root in the 1920s when the United States held a convention of states and ratified the 18th Amendment. After the 18th Amendment was ratified, the possession and consumption of alcoholic substances was therefore illegal. And with its prohibition, it has stirred many problems. A few of these problems was the expansion of bootlegging, which was the illegal distribution of alcoholic beverages, and secondly, it led to the mass incarceration rate in that time, and the prisons were forced to let violent offenders out of the state and federal prisons, which then became a public safety concern. As a result of all of this, a lawsuit ensued, and the Supreme Court of the United States ruled that the 18th Amendment was therefore unconstitutional. Which leads to a more rhetorical question. If the prohibition of alcohol wasn't a good idea, and it failed, then why would a prohibition on drugs and marijuana be okay? Moreover, another prohibition that the United States dealt with for more than 100 years was the prohibition on gay marriage. For it was deemed immoral by conservative groups. For years, and prior to legalization, gay couples were sent to asylums and many were sent to prison. But until June 26, 2015, when the Supreme Court ruled that the ban of same-sex marriage was in fact unconstitutional, and rightfully so. In addition to gay rights, we must find a balance between religious liberty and LGBTQ rights. For a prohibition on both would be detrimental to liberty in the United States. Therefore, we must not forget that the right to worship is in fact protected under the First Amendment of these United States and must be protected regardless of one's religious leanings. Finally, the debate on gun control and gun rights has been a very heated and debated topic. I'm here to set the record straight that the prohibition of arms to only a specific class of people is not only unconstitutional, but historically racist and abusive. Examples of this are Nazi Germany and, oddly enough, the United States. In Germany before World War II, once Adolf Hitler rose to power, he passed laws banning Jewish persons from owning and possessing arms. One of these laws was the Regulations of the Council of the People's Delegates and Weapons Possessions, which reads, all firearms as well as all kinds of firearms ammunitions are to be surrendered immediately. This was one of the many laws that was passed before the Holocaust. As we all know, the Holocaust was a mass genocide of innocent Jews. Another example of prohibition laws actually has once occurred here in the United States. During the pre-Reconstruction and after Reconstruction, firearms were prohibited to persons of color, but more specifically African Americans. One example of this was an 1844 law in North Carolina that prohibited African Americans from possessing arms such as rifles, shotguns, and handguns, and even specific knives. In the year of 1967, in California, then Republican Governor Ronald Reagan banned the open carry of guns after a group of Black Panthers protested on the state capitol. Therefore, laws like these have historically targeted minorities by disarming these groups of people. However, law enforcement or other groups are left armed, which has then empowered their recent abusive behavior. And thus, we must put an end to gun control and other firearms prohibitions. Therefore, once again, we ought to ask ourselves, if gun control or any kind of firearm prohibition has harmed minorities, then why would the same kind of prohibition be beneficial to the rest of society? In conclusion, any prohibition that has targeted those who wish to be left alone and therefore are not inflicting unjust harm on others should, in fact, be left alone. If we wish to live in a free and just society, we must choose. We must choose to let people live a freely from fear of prosecution and only go after those who inflict harm on the innocent. And this concludes my speech, and I hope everyone enjoyed this speech. And I want to wish everyone a wonderful week. Thank you.